busy then at the minute, I'm guessing.
I had it's unbelievable. Like, I had a baby 4 months ago, and apart from the personal life, the stuff online, like, minutes are like just hours are like minutes. It's just
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, like I'm probably the opposite at the minute. I was very busy up until we kind of hit that second lockdown at Christmas. And then since then I've been like I have a gym down here, so I've had to close up and I can't get working with any of the teams. So I've had a lot of time to myself over the past
What are you
three
doing? Like,
months.
how are you managing? That's tough.
At the start, see, for the first like 2 weeks, it was a challenge. Like mentally, it was tight going, and then I kind of realized that for me anyway, I'm the sort of person like I need to feel like I'm being productive in a day. So I just gave myself like a rule of getting up before 7 a.m. and then get up and plan out a day. So I would have a to-do list, structure it by the hour, and then at least at the end of the day, you can feel like you've been somewhat productive. But I'm actually rehabbing an ACL injury, so it's actually giving me quite a lot of time to focus on that and train. So in a lot of ways, it's been probably a positive too.
Sorry to hear about the ACL. That's you're obviously I'm working with a couple of ACLs myself at the moment, and they're as much a mental challenge as they are physical. They really are. Like, it just goes through. You go through phases.
I think I see that. I think it's at the start, it's particularly difficult whenever you're maybe watching football too, which is quite hard. I think probably a lucky time to do it now because nothing's been happening, so you don't get that temptation. But we've been given the green light in the north from the 12th of April that we can start back at training. So that wee bit of kind of like pressure starts to come on now. We want to kind of get yourself back or get in some sort of position. So it's all kind of becoming real again now. Guessing you doing quite a lot of podcasts, involved in quite a lot of podcasts at the minute.
That's on. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I love podcasts. I really, really have found that the conversations that I've had with people have been great. I think people who are willing to host podcasts they've interesting perspectives and angles. They've got their own stories, and I think it's so they've been very, very positive. But if I'm being quite honest, I've done so many that I feel like I now need to kind of space them out a bit. So I'm trying to minimize it to one a month, and I don't want to insult anybody, but it's like there's only so many you can do at the same time.
Yeah. I'm sure probably you maybe feel like you're repeating yourself quite a lot too in a lot of them.
I think that what in the early days when I started, definitely all the same questions, but I think people are recognizing that you need to find things that are relevant to your audience, and you need to ask better questions if you want your information to resonate with people. So it's got better. And what's interesting too about it is that I am finding it easier to navigate to things that I find really fascinating myself, and things that I haven't maybe said before. So that's been good, Fridays. So I work in Leinster and I work in Dublin, and Fridays are, so I'm mind baby from about 6:30 to 9, and then from 9 till 6 I'm like back to back all day. Yeah, but it's great. It's good. Like, I feel like it's a good way. It's a good way to get through the day. It's a good. It's a good way of feeling like you've had a good week if you've had a good Friday.
Yeah, you've been productive as well. Like,
certainly you feel like, well, that was a busy day. So I've got as you kind of feel like you caught up a little bit, even if some of the other days weren't as
Yeah.
as busy or productive. But
Do you
it's
try and take
interesting
it easy? Sorry, go ahead.
were you going to say try and take it easy the weekend?
I was saying, do you try and take it easy at the weekends, or do you find yourself working then too, or does it stop?
For the um for the benefit of my relationship, I've had to try and allow
Yeah,
some sort of free time. I am a self-declared workaholic, and I would happily work 14-hour days, 7 days a week. And I would break to play golf and maybe meet my friends at a Friday night for pints.
yeah,
Um, that's just, it's part of just my DNA. It's just, that's it. I don't know really. I don't know any different. And I think what's been really beneficial is having somebody who just says, no, I'm not accepting that. And every time that we have gone and we've done walks or outside of COVID restrictions, when we've gone on staycations, and I'm always going, no, I'm too busy. When I go on them, it's like, I definitely needed to do that.
yeah. I feel the benefit. Do you
Yeah.
find it hard sometimes, like when you're in a relationship, trying to maybe, obviously you're doing like a lot in social media and working with the teams, where you're maybe going, right, I have to get this post up, or I have to get this bit of work done, and maybe she's saying like, come on, do this. Like, do you find it hard, kind of getting
It's
her to
like
be
I'd
in
be
this, so it's
absolutely
not
lying.
the distraction?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said that absolutely, like, it is a point of conflict. There's no question. But I've got much, much better, because what I've realized is that there's always more to do. There's always more posts, or
Yeah,
there's always more content. Like, that's just, and actually recognizing as well that on actually having a plan, like you mentioned about how the way that you organize your day, if you do have clarity on, okay, well, here are the essential things that need to be done, and if I've got those done, well, everything outside of that can be a bonus. So
yeah,
when you reflect and you say, well, do I really need to get that post done? Do I really need to have that article finished? You probably don't.
yeah. I think like it's one of the things I have found since kind of starting the social media is you get like anxiety with it of, oh geez, I haven't posted something today, and you think if you
Yeah.
don't post today that like tomorrow all your followers are gone, and then you wait the other day and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, nothing actually changed. Like,
Here's an interesting thing that you mentioned around social media. It did take my did again. It's probably something we were talking about themes. I wouldn't have talked about this before, but I did have to get my head around the kind of drop off rate, and how many people unfollow you. You know that
mm,
you really do need to get your head around that, whether it's personal or it's not personal, it doesn't matter. That's
yeah,
just part of it.
I try not to look at analytics. Like I
Yeah,
remember one time
yeah.
looking at the follower rate, and you're like, what did I do in the past 24 hours? Like what? And then you
Yeah,
just, I just avoid looking at it now, because then you start questioning everything. So I just try not to look at any of that now. Like, um,
absolutely bang on. Yeah.
I am kind of curious just from, seeing the work, 'cause I know you're involved with Dublin and Leinster, and then you have your own clinic and doing online stuff. Like, how do you actually balance that with, I'm not sure if you're still playing football, but how do you find balance and all that? Is the challenge? Do you like have any, do you structure your day? Do you have, what way do you go about doing that in the week?
I structured the week rather than structuring the day. So I over the past 8 years have been working with Dublin and Leinster, and they have schedules. So both of those teams have schedules, Monday to Sunday, and it's very clear when I see a schedule for Leinster over the next 3 weeks, what days I need to be in. And when I'm in Leinster, that's it. You know,
Yeah.
that's where my focus and that's where my attention is. So from 7 a.m., half 7 in the morning until 5 o'clock that day, that's Leinster time, and that's it. So like nothing related to my own business really comes into my mind. I'm not thinking
Yeah.
about social media. I'm not like, I'll give you an example. Leinster are playing today. So there's a blackout period around when they play. So I'm not active on social media. So that just creates clarity. Well, my energy goes into something else, like, you know, having this podcast, or the follow-up content that I need to send on to people I'm working with, or it may switch to some of the conversations I might need to have in Dublin, but it's more offline. So a lot of it
Yeah.
is structured for me.
And then it's whenever you're in it, you're trying to stay probably present and focus on it, which is, I'm guessing, a challenge too. And you've got a lot of things coming at you too.
Yeah, and I I realized that with maturity, you become much better at mentally creating those divisions between your work and giving. You know, I'm a huge believer in in quality in every single aspect of my life. Like if I'm buying a Hoover or I'm doing any particular task, I do try and to bring a very high level of quality to whatever it is, a good level of detail. Now, if you looked at my bedroom, it's probably the only thing that's very, very unstructured.
Yeah.
But I am totally comfortable with that. You know, that
Yeah.
does not create any anxiety for me.
It's a controlled, there's a control, still some level of control there where you allow it to, like, isn't there? Um,
Yeah, well, relatively.
I suppose you need some of them places where the structure kind of goes a wee bit, and you can, you need that too, don't you? The yin and the yang.
And that is exactly how I feel about my food, and how I feel about how unorganized my bedroom is. And you know what, it's really it's really interesting. Like there's a huge similarity there, because I can walk into my kitchen, and as long as the ingredients are there, I can prepare something that's tasty and looks the part. And I feel exactly the same about my wardrobe. Like as long as the shirts are in there
Yeah.
somewhere, I'll pull something together. It'll be fine.
Uh, I think that's one of the things I like about the meals you put up, and I put up some meals, my highlights too, now at your level. But I think there's something good in, like, I think oftentimes when people think about cooking, it's, you have to go to the shop and get all these ingredients and get all this plan. But like there is something great in just looking at what there is in the fridge and looking what there is in the pantry and like putting it all together and seeing what happens. Like I think there is something great in that.
Yeah, and I feel like that too. As long as very, very philosophical question about food with my client, one of my clients this morning, and we were talking about, as long as the ingredients and the 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 resources are there, then yes. But if you're going there to prepare something and your pots and pans are dirty, or you don't have good resources, or you don't have some of those kind of key ingredients that you can be creative with, then that creates a challenge. So trying to
Yeah.
avoid putting yourself in those situations.
Do you have like kind of staple things you would always want in the kitchen, like whether it be
Yes.
spices or like veggies? What would they be? What would you always be buying?
Yes. Yeah. So like if you looked into my presses now, you will see more spices than you think is necessary for the next year. But I go through so much that always buy spices in bulk. I always buy nuts, seeds, oats, um, frozen vegetables, canned food, all of that kind of thing. I never need to be worried about getting some of those ingredients. I'll have jars of lentils. There'll always be quinoa. So even if I don't have a particular type of meat or an animal protein, I'll still be able to make a good vegetarian dish.
Yeah, it's always a backup nearly for you.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm quite curious, as when working with Leinster and Dublin, like I think people maybe have a perception of a nutritionist that you just send out like a diet plan to players, but like what does actually a day-to-day for you look like whenever you're working with Leinster, working with Dublin?
So nutrition is about coaching, and it's about mindset and psychology. And I was working in and as a nutritionist for a long time before I fully realized that it is all about behavior change. So every aspect of a person's preparation and what they do in their lives is about it's about their behaviors. So from my perspective, if you want to build high performing behaviors, then you have to be able to positively influence. And how do you positively influence? Will you build very strong relationships? So it all depends on the amount of time that you have available to do your job. If you've got a very limited time frame, um, and you've got only 3 sessions or 3 hours, or you're only on site once a month, you have to be sure that the person has the information that they need. So in that kind of context, it is, okay, let's drill into what the barriers are, the issues are. Here's a guide for how it should look, and here are your action points. See you next month.
Yeah.
Whereas it's the complete opposite to that. When you're working in a team environment, I can drip feed information while building up those relationships, and it's often uh, referred to as your corridor conversations. But the conversations that I have on the side of the pitch with an injured player, or somebody who comes in off the pitch early because they're managing their load or whatever it might be, those are the type of conversations that bring the greatest value. And that's around where a person is at within their own work commitments, their college exams coming up. What have they tried recently from a cooking perspective? Do they have good clarity on their goal settings? So, my questions always come down to very, very simply, I don't ask this straight away. It's always that the care of an interest in that person, and then it will be about, okay, well, what's going well and what can we improve?
Yeah, and then everything builds from that. So I think it's quite interesting, and like it's on you see whenever I'm working with people one-on-one, it's never just as simple as you give people the information of eat this many calories or eat that many. Like there's a lot more. It goes a lot deeper than that, I think. Like
Yeah, it does, because as I was saying, it's about behavior. But I think we made a kind of a jovial reference to people who, let's say, unfollow my content, or who don't choose to engage with my style. And I think there's something in that. I think that I don't give that kind of information. Yeah, it's on my website, and yeah, all of the calories and macros. That's if you want that content. Well, I'm paying somebody to do that nutrition analysis, and you can have that information. But that is only one very, very small part, and that's why so much of what I do is just sharing insights to the preparation of meals, because it's a really interesting conversation, and that's a bigger part of it. So it's the behaviors that you display every day to achieve. We're all trying to achieve the same thing, in the sense that we want to be at our physical and mental best.
And do you find that there is, when you work between your two teams, like is there common issues that you see keep coming up or just across players in general? And is there any, like, what would be your solutions to fixing them?
Absolutely, there's massive overlap between everybody, and it's about really prioritizing what each individual's goal is at any one time. And I think what people probably don't recognize is how quickly and how often circumstances change within a sporting environment, and how much things like selection, injury, workload, work, relationships, those are the kind of variables that are influencing people's choices and decisions. So you're there on an ongoing basis to facilitate conversation. And it's not about what the plan is in an essence or information. It's about how people can go about making, gaining clarity on what their priority is now, this week, compared to a month ago. It's not like we need to go into it's 2 grams of protein per kg body mass every single time. But what are you actively doing to hit your protein intake? What way are you structuring your meals? Are you taking the easy way out and having 2 protein shakes? Like, is that what you're doing? Or have you thought about putting a batch of protein bars together on Sunday evening? Have you thought about making protein pudding and putting them in the fridge on a Wednesday? Have you thought about adding some extra yogurt, making a fruit salad and having it with the side of the yogurt? Are you actively thinking about this stuff, or are you just going, oh, I'll have a protein shake?
Yeah. I said, like, it kind of seems like most of it is more, it's kind of like, as you're saying, cultivating relationships with them, where you can ask them questions and get honest responses, and not just kind of cliche responses to it.
Well, I've learned that the art of coaching is about asking good questions. I've made reference to this a few times because it was transformative. I did a performance coaching course in London about 3 years ago now. And I was put into a situation where I had to coach somebody through a problem. And I would have considered myself naively before I did that. I've got a lot of experience. I've worked in elite sport. I should be able to manage this. And the amount of mistakes I was making was frightening, because if you really want to help somebody change their behavior, then they have to come up with the solutions. And I was presenting solutions for them constantly. I constantly reverted to, well, why aren't you doing this? So if you can ask the right questions and people are thinking, I could do this, I could make those protein bars on Sunday, then you're doing a much better job.
Yeah, and then you may be providing on top of that, here's a recipe to do it, and here's maybe a method you can do it, and whenever they open the door, you kind of go through it then, like.
I think that's a hard thing to get to that, because there's a lot of time that goes into that, and it seems very top line, but that's what helps. That's the key to long-term change.
I think that's not so much like as in nutrition, it's coaching, isn't it? Like, that's influencing behavior. And I was reading today about the AFL coach, the guy called Hardwick, who is Richmond Tigers coach, and they were basically saying about how he has kind of, rather than be like he was as a player, was really hard-lined and would kind of flip very easily, but now he's very like player-centered. He's all about empowering players, asking the right questions. It's not like what you assume coaching would be 10 or 20 years ago. It's a lot more player empowerment now. And I think you start to see that when you look at coaching. It is all about, you have to get people to want to do it and feel empowered to do it.
Yeah. And I think that as time is going on, we're recognizing that more and more. And combining that with accountability and measurement is I tell you what, it's a fine balance, and that's what you're looking for all the time, because ultimately athletes respond to competition, and they respond well to target setting, and the better that you do that, and the more personal that you can be to that, hit that point at which somebody goes, yeah, that's it for me, I will work on that, then the more likely you are for them to achieve those particular measures, or those things that you're looking for from an objective standards perspective.
Yeah. So say if you have somebody listening to this and they maybe don't have like a performance nutritionist there to kind of help guide them and ask the questions, like what is the kind of questions you'd be telling somebody, if they want to go down that route and start exploring that and thinking about it, what's the kind of questions and things you would need to be considering yourself?
So this is what I apply with within my conversations with people on a one-to-one basis, where I have a conversation with somebody and I ask them to try and build out these processes for themselves. And what's really interesting is that we have all of this information available to us, but we need to help people understand where to start and what that process looks like. So it's a process of reflection. And if you look at something like tracking calories as an example, macro counting and tracking is successful on one end because it provides a certain level of education where people begin to understand, geez, I didn't realize there's so much calories in that. It creates an element of accountability where people going, oh, I'm not hitting my protein targets, or I'm over consuming calories. And it's creating adherence. So it's one component. Now, the drop-off rate from counting and actually tracking your calories and macros is phenomenal. Like, it is huge, because it doesn't change behavior. It isn't a long-term goal. So sorry, it isn't a long-term practice. It's not something that you can just do for the rest of your life. So what you have to try and do is create a reflective process with pen and paper. Okay. And it is about understanding that there are not 10 things I'm trying to achieve. I have to break down what aspects of my day, exactly like what I said I do with my conversation with athletes. What would you say are the biggest barriers right now to you achieving that goal? And people will say things like, I don't have any structure on my meals. I go long periods without eating. I eat too much in the evening. I order too many takeaways. Okay, whoa. Okay, what is the main one? If you said, okay, I'm going to begin to address it this week. Okay, I'm going to commit to it only being one takeaway, or I am going to commit to having breakfast. Planning, okay, well, what are the steps that you need to take to have your breakfast? Well, I don't have time in the morning. Okay, so go back to that. Would you try an overnight oats? Would you try a Bircher muesli? Would you try having the ingredients in a bowl already there for you to have? Yeah, I could try that. Let's do that for this week. And then you look back and you say, how did you do that? How well did you do? And it's a layer upon layer upon layer that you're looking at. And like, some of the things that people will say to me is, I had no idea how much progress I could make over the number of weeks and months. I had absolutely no idea. I had no idea how much better I would feel by implementing those small things. And I didn't realize how simple it could be if I actually did it and I was consistent. And I never would have known unless I had written them down.
Yeah. It's some, like, I'm sure people, when you look at everything that you think's going wrong, there's so much that you get lost in it. But if you break it down and then break that down again and work it one at a time, like you're saying, you could build a lot of habits in a long period of time if you're willing to commit to it.
Yeah, and the part that's the most challenging, and this comes up repeatedly, is competition within high performing environments are what drive standards. You know, the reason why Dublin and Leinster are so successful is because they have environments that are incredibly competitive, and if you're not adhering to those standards, well, somebody else will, and that's
Yeah.
ultimately what results in, you know, the standards being maintained. That's it. You know, it's competition. So how do you bring that into your lives? How do you bring that in, particularly, you know, you mentioned about me playing football. I've had to commit to some of those key principles, values myself, and say, well, this is who I am. This is what I've signed up to do for the rest of my life. This is the bare minimum. This is what I'm going to do. How do I then build in new layers of competition? Well, then I have to reach out and I have to become competitive with somebody else. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm actively pursuing people in my circle or my network who I can do that hike with, go for that cycle with, compete with on a very basic level for fun. Of course, it's fun, but you're introducing competition.
Yeah. And, you know, are you still playing football at the minute, or have you finished up, or?
Well, I had retired, but I'm playing a little bit of junior.
And do you find it hard, because you seem like the sort of person that will go 100% at everything? Do you find it difficult, like if you're playing football, to maybe, like, I don't know, I'm just maybe assuming you struggle to find time to fit all the training in with so much. Like, do you ever find that where if you can't put 100% in there, it gets tough for you?
Well, that's why I retired from a senior level. I didn't retire for any physical reasons. It
Yeah.
wasn't because I didn't believe that I could. I could. I maybe I'm saying this naively, but I still think that I could play at senior level and contribute. I think I could. But the amount of headspace that it takes up, it impacts every other aspect of my life. Like, I identify as being an athlete with myself, and that's how I would have wanted to be identified for most of my life. Not a nutritionist, not food, not my book, not those things. So it's, you know, I can feel myself, even being a part of that junior group, want to influencing those other people in a positive way, and pulling back, constantly pulling back, you know, wanting to send them things to follow
Yeah.
in the lead up to the game so that we can win, you know, that we can perform. So it's about
Yeah.
redirecting that into other areas.
Do you find it, you know, I don't know if you've been involved working in your own club, but and I'm asking
I
this
have.
more personally for me, but do you find it difficult, you know, maybe being viewed by players as sometimes more than a player, because you are providing these things? Like, for example, like I was doing S&C coaching for our club last year, and you do wonder, does there become an opinion in people's mind of, right, he's maybe moving away from being a player now, or have you found that, or?
Well, I was very clear within my conversations and within my behaviors, that I was there to be a player, and I was there to be a player for the team and to contribute in every way that I could as a player, and what the player's responsibilities would be. And I would meet those, absolutely, those commitments 100%. But that I was there to lend support in other areas if I could. But, you know, I used to get very frustrated, and I used to shut conversations down about my influence in other areas, because I didn't want to even have those conversations. I used to say, I'm here to play football.
Yeah.
So that's something that I did need to control because of my involvement. And I never wanted it to influence, or people to feel like it was influencing to any greater extent than it should.
Just being clear with the priorities, isn't it, from the kind of start, what you're
Yes.
there to do. And but
Yes.
it's probably difficult when you know, like you're saying, you want to go hard at everything and do the best job you can. It can be difficult sometimes probably to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because I like, even I would see things around training practices, programming, workload, training load, and I would be having an ongoing conversation in my sometimes outwardly, but mostly in my head. That's not for you to say, that's not for you to comment on, don't mention anything, blah blah blah. But I can, you can see when you're in, from my experience, what should and what shouldn't be done. But that's not, again, that's not what I'm there for. So if I'm asked, I can give an opinion.
Sometimes you just sit and bubbling, waiting for somebody to ask you about it, and then you just explode with the answer.
Yeah, and then it's fascinating, because like, at the end of the day, you're there, you're giving your time to something, and it's very hard to separate the fun and social element for me personally, even though that's just, I mean, I've taken up golf, and it's exactly the same.
I think if you have that mindset, it's hard to shut you off from it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is. I had this conversation with some of my they're my friends, but some of the guys who have won 5, 6 All Irelands, and trying to step back from being very
Lost your
progress.
Oh, got you now.
My sound dropped, did it?
Yeah, no, I got you now. Got you now. It just went for a wee second there.
Yeah, just not trying to constantly beat yourself up or overanalyze your progress in other aspects of your life. I even mean in my career and targets that you set, because like I said at the beginning of the conversation, there's always more to do. So how do you need to be able to enjoy it, like you really do.
I'm going to finish off the last couple of minutes just with a couple of wee quick questions, probably common questions that you hate and get all the time, but
quickly, don't feel like you have to go too much on them. One of the things I was curious about is looking at body weight for athletes and choosing, how do you know where your best body weight is? And like, say for me right now, for my performance, I'm sitting at like 94 kg, but I'm wondering, will I play better if I'm down at 91? Do you have any tips for that?
Oh my God, that is. I've never addressed this, and it's a superb question, because there are so many variables in this, everything from age to sport to playing position to the demands of your position to the demands of the sport to the time of the year. I mean, it probably took me 5 years of seeing objective data, having conversations, and having ongoing exchanges with people who are S&C focused, but also have a good understanding of physiology to get to that point where I can say, this is probably a good place for you to be. So obviously, it totally depends on the demands of the position and support on sport, like you said. So I don't think I'd be able to give you a properly informed opinion if I didn't see the 10 years of DEXA data that I look at, and that will give you a very good guide as to what level of lean mass an athlete has and what percentage body fat they have. So then you can go to, well, what will we see through different types of profiles? And there's a huge amount of overlap, particularly in GA, because there's people have play in different positions, and mostly people who are tall and carry a lot of mass are generally in more central positions.
Yeah.
So looking at that data, you're able to say, okay, a reasonable body fat percentage for an elite GAA player is somewhere around 12% or below. And depending on their lean mass, then it's a percentage. You're taking that percentage and you're saying, okay, so 12% body fat, where is their lean mass? So, if you're looking at an elite level, you're talking upper 70 kilos. Sorry, you're looking at the higher levels in the 70 kilo mark. So it's somewhere between 76 and 79 at elite level of lean mass that you're targeting. So if you've got a young athlete and they're playing in a central position, mass still matters. So it could be a case that they need from an overall performance perspective, from a physical perspective, to manage the physical nature of the sport, they need to be a higher percentage body fat. So you will have young backs or young central positional players in GAA carrying more body fat to manage that until they go through enough development phases to meet it, to know it. So how without all of those measures there's subjective measures of fitness and observing like how you feel in your shorts, how you feel in your boots, how you feel in front of the mirror, and how you're performing in the gym. So I've done lots of DEXs, but I can tell over time that if my gym performance and I'm meeting these numbers in the gym, my weight is at this, I look like a certain way that I look, and my mobility and fitness levels are consistent on the pitch, that's my sweet point. That's my weight. And you will find that over time.
Probably a bit of trial and error, as you're kind of saying, isn't it, too? Having a
definitely
reflective probably too, and just thinking about it.
Definitely. And I would find that older players don't realize, like I've had a lot of battles on my hands with some of the players coming towards the end of their careers thinking that lighter weight meant greater mobility, and not understanding that performance is more heavily impacted by power and by your ability to produce power and strength. And if that is impacted, that has a greater potential to influence your performance on the field, your ability to break a tackle, your ability to get away from somebody, to get onto your stronger side, to take a shot. Those are the things, besides covering more ground and feeling fit. You got to get that balance right.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's probably something you don't maybe think about. You only think about covering as much ground as you can, but again, probably position specific, but that power and strength is probably makes a lot of sense.
And athletes understand that once you explain it to them. So let's not compromise your lean mass here. Your lean mass is your currency for performance. So the more lean mass you carry, the greater strength that you have, and the greater resistance to injury you have, and the more likely you're going to be to continue to perform at that. Yeah, you're not going to cover the same overall amount of distance, but what is your metabolic output, and what is the influence on your game here? What have you done with the time you had and the ground that you've covered, rather than saying I'm still covering 10K in games?
Yeah.
Well, how much of an impact did you have on the game?
There's just a small one about in pre-match meals. What contribution is there to like maybe nerves, to like feeling sick before a game, or like having that kind of maybe just the stomach not feeling great? Was a common question that was coming up. Does nerves play a role in that, or is it mostly food?
Yeah, it does. So a major factor is obviously the volume of food that you eat on game day, and that's going to be there as an issue. That's going to be there as a problem. So can you just pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
Sorry, son. There's Hoover on here. Okay. Do you want to ask the question again?
Yeah. So
make it.
No, it should be okay. I should be able to cut this out anyway. So do you remember it okay?
I do. I do. It comes up a lot. Yeah, so the question around pre-match meals and how that affects you physically and how it affects you from a digestive point of view comes up regularly. There's been a big movement away from large volumes of food on game day for this very reason. So we know that the most important period of time for fueling is the day before. You know, that's when you're saturating your glycogen stores, you're increasing the fuel availability for exercise. There's too much emphasis, maybe from a historic point of view, placed on the pre-match meal and fuel on match day. So there's a real move towards eating larger, making sure you've got your carbohydrate load really well done the day before, eating larger meals earlier. So having a good breakfast and then tapering off. So if it's an evening match that, you know, 4 hours out is the last time, 3-4 hours out is the last time you eat. And, you know, pancakes are probably one of the most popular pre-match meals now, because people feel the word lighter comes up a lot, but I mean, that just means that the food is easier to digest. So creamed rice and pre-match meals, creamed rice and pancakes are the two kind of main staples now on pre-match meals over your traditional pasta dishes, which can make people feel a little bit the opposite, heavy and overly full. So keeping your fiber, fat and protein levels of your within food down, higher percentage of carbohydrate and easier to digest carbohydrate is definitely a much more beneficial way to go. And then, you know, what my pre-match meal used to be apple juice and Nature Valley bars, because that's as much as, you know, I could really tolerate. And I think understanding, you know, you've mentioned a few times throughout our chat about that reflection, that trial part, that, you know, trial and error, like that played such a major role in me figuring out my personal way to fuel up for games. I used to find some foods that other athletes loved as part of their fuel up really didn't suit me. And things like, you know, baked potatoes, granola bars and apple juice is what worked really well for me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But there's always an alternative solution. That's the important message I have. Just because people out there, you know, you hear things like pasta chicken, rice and chicken, that's what you should be eating. There's no should. There's always an alternative.
And whatever you feel best eating too.
Definitely.
Right, I think I've taken up probably enough of your time today. So before we finish up, do you want to maybe let people know where they can find out more about you or find out more information?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's been a pleasure chatting. The time has flown and I've really enjoyed the questions. Definitely it's gone from a couple of topics that maybe I wasn't expecting going into, but all really relevant and really positive. And I think there's simplicity is difficult to achieve, but if you can reflect on simple things and be consistent with your simple things, and you know, you're going to put yourself on a path for improvement. And that's what I love talking about, you know, the simplicity of having the right things in your cupboard and having an easy system to follow. So yeah, I'm Davey Nutrition is the company name. You can find me on Facebook at Davey Nutrition, on Instagram, and I have a website now where I'm incredibly proud of the content that I'm putting out there with my team. It's, you know, there's new articles, recipes, meal plans, and videos go up there every week. And the idea is to give people the knowledge, information, motivation, support to achieve their goals. So just a thanks to you to having me on. I really appreciate it. And I think we've had a good chat.